Hi everyone, you're listening to The Future of Food Is You, a production of the Cherry Bomb Podcast Network. I'm your host, Abina Anamsamwa. Each week, I'll be talking to emerging talents in the food world. We'll hear about their dreams, aspirations, and predictions for what's ahead. As for me, I'm the founder of The Eden Place, a community that's all about gathering people intentionally around food. I love this new generation of chefs, bakers, and creatives making their way in the worlds of food, drink, media, and tech. Today's guest is the incredible Jenneh Kaikai. She's the founder and cake designer behind Pelah Kitchen, a custom bakery based in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. Her cakes are stunning and decadent, truly some of the best I've ever had. Jenneh also just started a new gig at Hot Bread Kitchen, a nonprofit organization that we'll learn more about in just a minute. And she recently returned from a trip to Ghana and Sierra Leone to explore both her roots and some entrepreneurial opportunities. I also just got back from a trip to Ghana, so I'm really excited to have this conversation with Jenneh. Thank you to Kerrygold for supporting The Future of Food Is You. Kerrygold is the iconic Irish brand famous for its award-winning butter and cheese made with milk from grass-fed cows. Let's talk butter first. There is a Kerrygold butter for all of you out there. From soft and spreadable butter in a tub to sticks of salted or unsalted, a perfect measurement for the recipes calling for a stick of butter. Much to my surprise, there's a Kerrygold butter blended with olive oil, which is about to become a pantry essential. My go-to is the traditional block of Kerrygold unsalted butter, perfect for baking because of that high butterfat content, and also because I can control the amount of salt in the specific recipe. Then there's Kerrygold cheese. Their options go way beyond their classic cheddar. There's Kerrygold Blarney Castle cheese, which is like a Gouda, Kerrygold Swiss, yes, the Irish make a Swiss cheese, Kerrygold Skellig, a sweet and tangy take on cheddar, and the rich and delicious Kerrygold Cashel Blue Farmhouse cheese. For the best cheese board, just accompany these with some grapes, your favorite crackers, and some funky jams for contrasting vibes. If you haven't tried Kerrygold yet, don't delay. The future is now. Look for their butter and cheese at your favorite supermarket, specialty grocery store, or cheese shop. Visit KerrygoldUSA.com for recipes, product information, and a store near you. Now, let's check in with today's guest. Jenneh, so excited to have you on the podcast.
I am so excited to be here.
I feel like we have so much to talk about. But let's start off with the good news. You just started a new job. Congratulations. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. So I started at Hot Bread Kitchen. I am now director of HBK Incubates, Hot Bread Kitchen Incubates, which is their small business incubator program.
That's really exciting. And how did you come to discover Hot Bread Kitchen?
It's actually like an amazing full circle story. Last fall, I participated in their Proof Pitch program, which was basically like an 8-week small business incubator program. And at the end, there was this big showcase where I got the Most Innovative Award.
That's super exciting.
So great. And I really got more familiar with the program through my own participation in that showcase. But just from living in New York, I've heard a lot about Hot Bread Kitchen. They used to run a kitchen space, actually, up in Harlem, and just always heard about them as a major player in like the nonprofit world, especially nonprofits supporting women and immigrant women.
What are 2 or 3 lessons that you learned from your time within that incubator that you're hoping to bring into the job?
I learned the importance of kind of being in your peers as mentors, because it was a cohort-based program and there was so much that I learned just from the other women who were running businesses. I think also, learn that not everyone, I get so nervous about some of the ins and outs of running a business, but I realized that so many people, even people who are running businesses that have been successful for 10 years or so, are still figuring so much of it out. And so I think it taught me to go a little easier on myself and that it's a process. And then I think the third part was just that people are really excited about what I'm doing. And it gave me a lot of motivation. And I think that enthusiasm that I felt not just from the staff and other folks that were invested in the program, but just the process in general gave me a big push to kind of keep going.
Let's throw it a little back to the beginning of Jenneh Kaikai the Great. You are from Lowell, which is in the Boston area.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about how food showed up in your childhood?
Oh my God. I love talking about Lowell because I think a lot of people who are from smaller towns outside of major cities, they're like, oh, I'm just from Boston. And I was born in Boston, but I was raised in Lowell. And Lowell was just truly like the most diverse place I've ever been, frankly. I mean,
Wow.
in high school, after school, we would go get Colombian empanadas, right? Or we would get in the morning, there's a really huge Cambodian population in Lowell. And so I grew up eating a lot of like mango and hot pepper or katiu, which is like a kind of a soup, almost like a pho, ramen,
Yeah.
that family. I also grew up around a lot of Brazilians, a lot of Dominicans, Puerto Ricans. And so I was exposed to so much in
Yeah.
terms of food. And it's just a really exciting place to be, like in terms of the food scene, especially if you are interested in foods from different cultures.
Are there like 2 or 3 spots that if you were to go home this weekend, that's like the first stop off the Amtrak or the plane?
Actually, so timely because I'm going home this weekend. And
Perfect.
I will most likely first stop at Simply Khmer, which is a Cambodian restaurant that has everything from like the squid. They have this really delicious fish that's in a coconut curry
Oh my
fish in a
gosh.
banana leaf. Also, there's a really small, I think it's called Sophie's, which is a Greek like market cafe. And so I'll go there and get yogurt and just other goodies.
Provisions.
There's so much. There's a Vietnamese spot called Hung Cook. I typically would go there for banh mi or egg rolls or bubble tea. I truly
Yeah.
go home and I eat.
That's amazing. I feel like, in New York, we're so blessed and you think you'll never find that kind of concentration of diversity. But it sounds like you have that as too, especially in the Northeast. That's really impressive. And now I want to like take a field trip to Lowell.
I highly recommend it. I mean, I don't know what else you're going to do outside of the food, but
That's fine. That's all I need to do, honestly. You grew up in Lowell, but you didn't come to food directly. You ended up actually having a career, I would say, in the opposite direction, working in government and public policy. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Oh, yes. I actually moved to New York for a fellowship in government. And so I basically spent the first 7 years of living here jumping around through different government agencies, specifically focused on like urban planning and real estate. So different than food.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, my last position, I was a policy advisor in the previous mayor's administration, and I had an economic development portfolio where I worked a lot with the Department of Small Business Services. I worked a lot on the policy for outdoor dining here in New York and just did a lot of work with like hospitality folks. I really, really, really was inspired by restaurants and the hospitality industry during especially that early part of COVID, like the resilience and is ingenuity the word I'm looking for? But like people, it's people's livelihood. So people really were creative about thinking about ways to keep their businesses running.
Yeah.
You saw it. You'd go into a restaurant and there'd be it was like a mini grocery store, or just thinking about the outdoor dining structures. It obviously was a very dark time in our city, but it also was a really inspiring time just to see, even just walking here this morning and seeing some of the outdoor dining sheds and things and just looking over at it and being like, wow.
New York is back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's get away from the old job stuff because
Please.
while you were in the old job stuff, though, you started your cake business, Pelah Kitchen. What inspired you to kind of start off Pelah Kitchen as a hobby, just making cakes?
Yeah. So the story it's truly like an accidental story. I live in Bed-Stuy, and there was a market, kind of started right at the top of the pandemic, Building Black Bed-Stuy, and that was based on an organization that was raising money to support businesses in Bed-Stuy. And so I would go on the weekends and buy things from the makers and vendors, and in talking to them, a lot of people were like, I started this 2 months ago. I started this 6 months ago, all within the pandemic. And I just felt, I don't know, I just felt like I've always had this idea, of doing something in food. And then it was literally interacting with those vendors at that marketplace where I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna email like the Building Black Bed-Stuy Gmail address.
I love that.
And, I very quickly they responded and they were super excited, but they were like, all right, so what's your business website and your business name? I didn't even have any of those set up. And so I made those things up on the fly.
Yeah.
And then vended at a marketplace maybe 2 weeks after that, and I sold out and continued to do marketplaces. That's kind of how it started.
That's amazing. And I really love the meaning of the name Pelah. What does Pelah mean?
when they asked me for my business name, and I was really thinking of something super literal. I was like going to do Kitchen 270 because of, where I lived at the time.
That's such a common theme in New York.
So corny, though. And my mom, I was telling her about it, and she was like, I want to do something like that touches on like Sierra Leone, so we're going back and forth. And I was like, oh, Pelah. Pelah means home. So Pelah means home in my language, Mende,
Mende, okay.
Which I don't really speak. But people, especially family, would ask me, like, in jest, because they knew I couldn't speak the language. Oh, where's your dad or where's your mom? And then I would be like, oh, ta Pelah, which means at home.
Yeah.
Because that's like the few words that I knew. And so it just stuck.
Pelah, that's awesome.
Pelah Kitchen.
I like Pelah. Pelah Kitchen. So then Pelah Kitchen is official. Why did you decide on cake?
I really love cake.
It's the best.
I'm the person who, when I used to work in the financial district, I would like walk over to Billy's Bakery in Soho. Or I would, go to if I was taking the Amtrak home, I would like go to Magnolia Bakery and get cake. Like, I love cake. I love a good slice of cake. It was something that I feel like I started years ago. Like when I was younger, I used to bake box cakes and using like the frosting in the jar.
Yeah.
And
good old Betty Crocker.
You know it. And so it's just always something that I've been drawn to, cake. Years ago, I bought a very basic like Wilton decorating set and like tried to. One of my best friends was graduating from Tulane, and I remember I actually tried to make her a cake with the Tulane like emblem on it, using like my little Wilton piping, and it was so ugly. But
you gotta start somewhere.
That's where it started, honestly. I've always been a Food Network, just really interested in like every cooking show, like OG Top Chef fan.
It's like watching Barefoot Contessa when everyone else like watching Disney Channel.
Exactly. The pioneer woman was my girl,
Yeah. Ree Drummond. Shout out to Ree.
Yeah. And so it's just been something that's always been like an interest of mine. And cake was just the medium that I chose first. But yeah, I just love sweets.
Yeah. I was so blessed you ended up making a cake for my birthday party / Cherry Bomb Future Food Is You party launch. And it was like truly one of the best cakes. I think I had it like 2 weeks after my partner was like, where did you get this? And I was like, dude, this is insanely good. What I've really admired about you is that you are self-taught. Who were the people that you were kind of learning from or taking in as you were developing your cake practice?
Cake practice. I love that. So let's just go back to that night, your birthday / celebration, because there were a couple of other bakers and I really admire them. And so immediately the imposter syndrome set in. Everyone's going to have my cake and just be like, who let her in the lineup,
Yeah, every cake there was a winner in its own right.
Yeah. And that community, I think, is where I pulled a lot of inspiration from. I tell people sometimes, like, there's a whole side of social media that's like cakes. But just in terms of flavors and aesthetic, it was truly social media driven. And again, a lot of people I look up to are people that you all work with. I love From Lucy's Cake.
Oh, she's the best.
I love, by Penza, and I'm saying their Instagram names instead of their
No,
names.
that's great. I feel like Instagram is a new directory. So
it really is. And then there's like just people from all over. Like I follow some cake accounts in like Australia or people in Brazil. There's just it's truly like its own world.
Yeah. How has the cake community sort of supported you, and how has social media helped you in spurring the growth of Pelah Kitchen?
I don't know where I would be without social media because
yeah, that's beautiful.
I truly, truly have a community. Like people are so nice, especially of the baking community. The amount of times that I've seen someone post a cake and I've just sent them a DM. What size cake pan did you use for that tiered cake? Or I'm trying to play with different types of buttercreams and things. And because I am self-taught, some of the science-y parts, when you're making a Swiss meringue buttercream, you can't add liquid. Or if you can, it's just not going to infuse the flavor. And I learned that from Bayou Saint Cake. Because I think I put something on Instagram and she responded to that. The community, like number one, I just get a lot of support in terms of like messages and likes and reshares, but also just like educationally, there's a lot of support there too.
Yeah.
Like I remember I had my first wedding cake and I was so nervous about transporting it because it was for a friend and her wedding was a couple hours away in upstate New York. I was so nervous about like how do we get it there. And Lonnie from formerly Brutus Bake Shop, I had gone to a pop-up of hers, and she was like giving me different tips about put a towel on the seat so that it doesn't like slide, or freeze it the night before.
You've been doing this for almost 3 years now? 2 years and some change?
Yeah.
I know you've talked a lot about like the imposter syndrome and the anxiety that comes with running such a challenging business. What have been some of the toughest parts of running the business, and how have you like overcome them in building stuff?
Well, number one, the imposter syndrome.
Very real.
Just feeling like I didn't go to school for this. I'm not trained. I don't have the years of working in a kitchen or running a kitchen, or even just in terms of purchasing ingredients at bulk. All of that is so new to me. Continuing to kind of keep going when, it can be when you don't know how to do something, it can be very easy to be paralyzed by that, and just trying to keep going, because I think for me, the biggest challenge has been almost like believing like this is like my real life. Like I'm really doing this. Like this isn't, to come into this studio today, I was looking through some old notes trying to find like previous wisdom. And I was going through notes that were going back 3, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And I was talking about this stuff, whether it was, it wasn't Pelah and it wasn't cake, but it was like food and different ideas and things. So imposter syndrome has been a challenge, but I think I go to myself sometimes for that inspiration to see like where I've come from.
That's
like,
beautiful.
Oh, whoa, like you wrote this thing down and now look.
Now you're living it.
Other challenges are more, I think, like practical. Things are so expensive. Everyone's talking about eggs right now. But for those of us in the baking community, like butter's been expensive even before everyone else started talking about it. So figuring out like pricing and trying to be fair, but while also trying to make money. When I first started, I was pricing my cakes at like $50 a cake, which when I $55, which when I think about that now, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense, because that's just the ingredients.
Yeah.
You have to start somewhere. And I think at the time, it was very much just like a hobby. So I was like, well, I don't know. Like, no one's taking this seriously. Like, I'm just going to, make sure that I just get back whatever I paid on ingredients for the cakes. And so to kind of price my cakes in a way that I believe is worth the value at a place that I feel like is fair to me based on the work that I've done. But also like, I look at my cakes as like art. And so I think, how much would you pay for a beautiful piece of art?
Yeah.
And then you can eat it. So it's even better.
Yeah. And I also think in the last year, I think especially with the pandemic, a lot of people are more considerate of the price. If a cake's $180 or $200, you're understanding like the breakdown much more than I think 5 or 6 years ago, when there wasn't that much of an appreciation for food. So like, for instance, if I need to go to an expensive dinner or something, I guess part of working in the industry is you understand the justification of the cost. But I think you should always double your worth as much as you can, if anything. But I'm sure you've also had some pinch me moments starting the business. You've been featured in Vanity Fair. You've done some work for Cherry Bomb. Can you tell us a bit about the feeling or the experience when you did that Vanity Fair shoot?
Oh my gosh. So whenever something really exciting comes into my inbox, I think it's a scam. So like immediately, because like, now realizing that how these shoots and things work, it's like oftentimes some production company or like an intern reaching out to you. And I was like, Vanity Fair, yeah, right. And so literally, I think it was until I got to the actual shot at the Beekman Hotel. I think it wasn't until I actually got there and like saw the setup, and I was like, oh wait, and like it was with Z-Way. It was a shoot with Z-Way.
Icon.
And saw her, and I was like, oh wait, this is real.
So for those of you in the audience who don't know who Z-Way is, she's a Black comedian who has a incredible Showtime show, but has also become a bit of a New York fashion icon.
So that was 100% a pinch me moment. They had asked me to make cakes for kind of a tea party spread, and then they were doing a million things on the set. So they were kind of like, all right, we need to style it with like, come to find out the china that was used in the tea was like so expensive. And so I was kind of left by myself. And so I took it upon myself to just style the table. And the photographer came down, Kennedy Carter, who shot Beyonce's Vogue cover.
Wow. A major slay.
And she was like, you have such a great eye. And I was like, me? So that was a pinch me moment. I think, I was featured for just a few seconds in Google, had an International Women's Day campaign, and I came right after Tracy Ellis Ross's little spiel about her hair care line. And that was definitely a pinch me moment. That for that opportunity, I also thought it was some random
Yeah, you're like,
bot.
Google, never heard of her.
Some random bot messaging me asking, I don't know. But yeah, every moment is a pinch me moment because I didn't think I would be doing this.
As you think of Pelah Kitchen expanding and growing, are there 2 or 3 clients that you would love to make cakes for in the future?
Number one, I actually had the opportunity, and I'm an extreme fan. Sana, the founder of Diaspora Co. If you follow me on Instagram, I am always raving about their spices. And I did a cake, actually, for Cherry Bomb. And it was the day that she was doing her cover shoot.
So exciting.
Right?
Yeah.
So imagine the look on my face to see her in there. But also, I have a cake in my hand that has Diaspora Co. cardamom, ginger. And so making a cake for her was really great. And she sent me a message after and just said how amazing it was. And that really, really resonated with me. If I'm being totally honest, I think sometimes it's hard because now in the age of the food person as the celebrity and influencer, I sometimes struggle because I'm like, oh, I want this particular person to have my cake. I made a cake for an event for the Woman King premiere in New York.
Whoa, that's huge.
But wait. There's more. It was at a restaurant, and they sent the run of show, and I was convinced Viola Davis was going to have my cake. And Viola Davis is not there. Then it just made me realize that you're almost this idea of a particular celebrity or someone with a certain status having my cake. That's great, but I really appreciate people in the food community, people that appreciate good food, good desserts. There aren't these people that I really want to have my cakes, but people who know food and find value in what I'm doing, that means the most to me.
That's very profound too, because I think everyone has aspirations for their dream celebrities and the people that they're inspired to be in conversation with them. I think about the day that I get lunch with Ina Garten at least once a day, but just to keep me going. But also it's I've had just as impactful or even more nurturing conversations with people who are impactful but may not be as famous. So I really like that answer. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Hi, everybody. It's Carrie Diamond here. I'm the founder of Cherry Bomb and the host of Radio Cherry Bomb, and I have a special event to tell you about. The Cherry Bomb Jubilee Conference is taking place Saturday, April 15th at Center 415 in Manhattan. Jubilee is the largest gathering of women in and around the world of food and drink, and this will be our 10th in-person Jubilee. It's also Cherry Bomb's 10th birthday. Jubilee Day is filled with great talks, networking, beautiful things to eat and drink, and lots of opportunities for connection, conversation, and community. Jubilee tickets are on sale now, so visit cherrybomb.com for more, or click on the link in our show notes. We'd love to see you there.
We've had really awesome conversations about Pelah not just being about cake, but also about other things. And we both actually recently had a fun, exciting trip. We were both in Ghana at the same time. And you actually had a Kickstarter to fund your trip to Ghana, and you exceeded your goal, raising almost $8,000. That's incredibly impressive. So the first phase of your trip was in Ghana. Can you tell us a little bit about why you were there and also what it was like? Because Ghana is such a vibe, personally speaking.
My family's from Sierra Leone, and a goal of mine has, even when I was heavy into the real estate and planning work, I've always wanted to do something in West Africa. And I ended up going to Ghana for the first time last year and just fell in love, literally and figuratively. And, I think I've gone back a few times, but I really wanted to do something there because I'm so inspired by the food community there. And I knew that I would also be going to Sierra Leone. I knew there'd be 2 very different trips. And so it was almost I wanted to just test out the waters and see what it would be like. Because after going to Ghana a couple of times and people would follow me on Instagram and see what I was doing here, there was a lot of interest. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to try to bring Pelah, to West Africa. Let's see what it's like.
Yeah.
And it was so hard.
Dang.
So raising the money was, let's just talk about that for a second. If anyone listening has ever done any sort of Kickstarter fundraising, it was so vulnerable. I literally have had an idea of doing some sort of crowdfunding for years, but I think I had a lot of reluctance because I wanted to have a fully baked plan before I asked people for their money, especially at a time like this. I'm not naive to what many of us are going through financially. But what was so incredible was like, I raised that much. I had set a goal for $7,000. I raised almost $8,000 in 3 weeks. And no one was asking me, give me a rundown of your itinerary for every day. People just believed in me,
Yeah.
you know? There's a woman who she has her own jam company, and I met her one time. I was using some of her jams for my cakes, and she gave me $1,000 towards
That's
my
amazing.
campaign. And she was just like, I believe in you.
Yeah.
And so I kind of went in with that energy. I have all of these people supporting me back home. I had really, really high expectations. And then there's the reality. And Abina, you can attest to this. Like cooking and baking and that sort of climate is very challenging, right? Just in terms of the ovens. Even a lot of places don't have gas or electric ovens inside the home. A lot of restaurants and spaces like that, they're cooking in a very... Even if the decor of the actual restaurant looks a certain way, when you go to the kitchen, it's old school. I don't know what the technical name for these ovens are, but there's not like a temperature setting, but it's like 2 flames, 3 flames.
Yeah.
And so, I wasn't expecting that. I also, the cost of ingredients,
Yeah.
I was floored. I
I
mean,
remember your Instagram stories. I was like,
Oh.
$10 for butter?
expensive butter, cream. I will talk over and over again about the price of cream, a liter of cream being like $17, $18 because it's all imported,
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so thinking about that made me just almost take a step back with, okay, so it's not just like you pack your bags and you start making beautiful cakes here. Like there's so much, even down to my aesthetic with the flowers. Flowers are not, it's super hot. And flowers don't necessarily
Yeah.
do well in hot climates. So I did do an event where I made some display cakes and like very shortly the flowers were super wilted on the cake. And so there was a lot to learn. I did an event with Every Stylish Girl, which is like an amazing Instagram account, but also their entire brand is to support Black women, small business owners. And so they had an event where they had some really great panels talking about social media and entrepreneurship. And so I got to have my cakes there. I got to, like I said, what started out as a beautiful display. It was still beautiful, but the flowers were struggling a little bit. And got to just meet a lot of really great people. The interesting thing with that event was that a lot of folks were from New York and Philly and
Yeah.
the States, because a lot of folks are visiting Ghana during that time from the diaspora.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, when I was there, I did an event with Ghana Food Movement.
Yes.
They curated a private lunch, and I got to make a couple cakes for the dessert and just talk to them about my involvement in Ghana Food Movement, a little bit about myself. And it was wonderful. It was like intimate. And there was a woman who came up to me after and said, what you're doing is so beautiful. Like she said that my hands were really blessed. And so that was great because that came a couple days after the previous event. And I really needed that boost because one thing that I felt that was challenging for me was just around people finding the value in what I'm doing or feeling like people may not see the value in it. Like it's just like she makes cakes, cool. But like the artistry and some of the other elements, I don't necessarily know that people got it. So to go to be, again, like in this space with food-centered folks, it's just different, you know? If people are at an intimate lunch hoping to taste like local Ghanaian food curated by a group like Ghana Food Movement, they really appreciate what I was doing versus, a different setting that's just maybe not, I was like, oh, the cake tastes good, cool.
Yeah. What I was really excited to talk to you about was, I think in the last 3 to 4 years, like Ghana has been put on the map. I think partly a lot to do with the year of return, but now it's like, I just read an article the other day Ghana being dubbed as the gateway to Africa. It's a small country of 30 million people. So I'm really curious, how are you hoping to use Pelah Kitchen to kind of start building the community there and also create a connection between the diaspora that exists here in North America and the diaspora that exists in Africa?
Just in terms of the community I've built in Ghana, I think it's really important for me to talk about the Ghana Food Movement.
Yeah.
They are a group of folks who come together to support Ghanaian agriculture, restaurants, food, and it's the kind of space I feel, that I wish we had in Sierra Leone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I met those folks because they had a kind of meeting, and I saw that it was happening on Instagram, one of my first trips to Ghana, and I messaged them and I went to their builders meeting and was just so inspired. One of the things that I think really inspired me was the collective of chefs that they work to support. Because one thing, and I'm sure you noticed this too, there's a growing food scene, but the idea of like this chef as like a chef is like a cook. It's a profession, right?
It's not revered like it is here.
No,
Exactly.
no. But I believe, I really, really appreciated that the Ghana food movement is creating a space for these chefs to not just only shine, but to connect them to other opportunities. They brought a couple of chefs to the Netherlands for an event or an exchange for a week or so. They have these events called Dine and Dance, where the dinner is focused on a particular like indigenous ingredient. They had one on like fonio, which, Chef Pierre Cham is always talking about with ukulele, and millet and tiger nuts. Like I had this amazing tiger nut burger.
Oh, wow. I got the tiger nut juice like on the roadside, but yeah, tiger nuts they're making a comeback. The next it nut. Yeah.
Right. And so number one, my hope is that from people seeing what I'm doing, that they can also feel inspired to build community across continents, if you will.
Yeah.
I had really big dreams of hosting my own event there. Need a little bit more planning for that, but it's something that I do hope to do. In general, though, I think what I'm most interested in right now is actually figuring that question that you asked, like how can I have my business that's here in New York, in Brooklyn, and really tie it tangibly to the continent. And so far that's looked like there's certain ingredients that I've been adding to my cakes. Like I keep raving about calabash nutmeg or African nutmeg.
Oh, yes.
And it's really, and funny enough, when I've met other folks, they are like, well, you use that in stew. Like you wouldn't put that in something sweet. But it's so fragrant and pungent that like it's actually great in some of the more spice-forward desserts that I make. I've talked also about this other company, a husband and wife owned company called Gold Coast Cocoa. And I met them. Again, I'm just like sent them a cold email, and they actually have an oven in their home. And so, we built a relationship. And this past trip, I baked in their home with two of their kids.
That's so adorable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So shout out to Susu and Sebastian. And so, like I was saying, I'm really hoping that people can be inspired by what I'm doing in terms of the relationships that I'm building. I know someone coming to New York soon, and I reached out to a chef to see if he could get me some honey, because I went on a trip recently and I brought back some like local honey that was incredible. It was very like almost like caramelly and just so dark and so rich. And so, I'll be having some honey coming from like the northern region of Ghana soon.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking to figure out how to like scale that, quite frankly, because I don't know how bringing back a couple of bottles in your suitcase or a couple of Ziploc bags full of nutmeg, it's okay for now, but I would love to do something bigger. And the Ghana food movement, to plug them again, I love that they highlight Ghanaian brands. So when I was there was actually a week that they had a campaign called Buy Ghana, Build Ghana, where they challenged people to just eat, whether it was like cooking or restaurants, Ghanaian produced, like just local foods.
Which I'm sure was difficult because my dad works in agriculture in Ghana, and I always hear stories. I think Ghana imports like a large percentage of their food despite being like incredibly arable, despite the youth population. So here in North America, we're so good at farmers markets, supporting local businesses. But a lot of Africans now are still having to kind of break the stigma of what it is to enjoy indigenous culture. So I'm really excited that you are taking that as part of your journey, not just to make cakes, but also to create this relationship where people can feel comfortable, especially Black people can feel comfortable owning the narrative of what it means to enjoy like your local dishes and your local cuisine in this exciting and enriching way.
And I just want to talk about that a little bit. What I found really fascinating was that like volume of things that are imported and how expensive the local products are. But then when you're talking about that in the context of a developing nation, it's almost like it'd be great if everyone could just buy from Ghanaian brands, but it's so expensive.
Yeah.
That's, I think, something very nuanced. When I participated in that challenge, I made 2 desserts. I made a chocolate cake using like Gold Coast cocoa and coconut oil. I used coconut milk. That was actually, again, a friend in the Ghana food movement had some fresh coconut milk. And it was tasty, it was good, but it was hard to source all of the different local ingredients. I made almost like a little play on like a key lime pie. It's a little tart with like the local, I don't know the name, but the really small limes.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Which are a pain to zest.
Yeah, because they're so hard. Yeah.
They're so hard and
Their
don't have a lot of
oranges
juice.
aren't like squishy like ours. Yeah.
Yeah, or even just like lemons. You know, when they say lemon, it's green.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, but this is a lime. And they're like, no, this is a lemon. So there's just so many interesting little pieces like that made it like really, really fun. But I don't know, if I was running a business, it'd be really challenging.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about your Sierra Leone trip, because I think that one was more about planting seeds for the future of Pelah Kitchen. So you've talked a lot about coffee and cocoa. Would love to hear how you're hoping to incorporate that within the Pelah Kitchen universe.
So Sierra Leone was, and I've said this on my social media multiple times, like I'm still trying to like figure out how to even, I haven't really processed everything. I wasn't someone who grew up going to Sierra Leone. I went for the first time in 2018. And so I'm just trying to give you like this perspective on like how new a lot of this is to me. And so when I first talked to my family about wanting to Pelah, but expanding to do something, there was a lot of hesitation, frankly. But I think what really motivated me, I saw a really short BBC video about a particular species of coffee that was indigenous to Sierra Leone. And I kind of came across that in the early parts of the pandemic. And then I started doing research. And I was like, oh, we used to grow coffee? And then it was like, oh, and we cocoa? Mm-hmm. And we had these like thriving agricultural, I guess, not just opportunities, but like exports and things like that. And I'm like, well, what happened? We had war, we had Ebola. They're just all of these different things that have made the agricultural sector, I wouldn't say obsolete, but there isn't a big investment in agriculture. And so I initially just had the plan of going in just to like learn. Mm-hmm. Come to find out, talking to some family, I realized my mom's side, they have a farm. So my grandmother's brother has a farm where he grows cocoa and coffee. And so I was like, okay, well, let me just go and check it out. I also, before I left New York on this trip, I connected with some folks who are already doing coffee kind of production and sales in Sierra Leone. So I want to be clear that I'm not like the only person doing coffee. People are doing it at a smaller scale, but there's an interest and an enthusiasm growing, right?
That's really exciting.
Yeah, and so I connected with them, but I also wanted to see what was going on with this farm with my family. And so I planned a trip to go to the village where my family is from, and I saw something that you posted on your Instagram showing, I think, the house that your dad grew up in.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I can't even wrap my mind around it. Like all my life I heard my dad was born in the village. I'm like, the village, air quotes. What does the village actually mean? And I went and I was like, oh, to risk sounding like a very just out of touch, first generation person. No more, yeah. I was just like shocked, mm-hmm. Everything from just the conditions.
Yeah. What indoor plumbing? Yeah.
What indoor plumbing, like there's so many children. A lot of the children had their teeth were rotting in their mouth, really torn clothing. And I just couldn't help like, wow, my dad was one of these kids at one point, mm-hmm. Or even just walking through the village and just seeing people like sitting out in front of their like, I'm going to say huts, right?
You're not
wrong.
Yeah.
And there's this, and it's challenging for me because I feel like I was at a loss for words, honestly. Yeah. So then you have that dynamic, right? Just this is where you're from. Then we're like actually on this beautiful, there was coffee everywhere. And like the coffee cherries, they haven't ripened yet. They haven't been harvested, but just seeing them in abundance. And they were bringing me cocoa, the cocoa pods.
Oh, and you can eat the pods. Oh,
yeah.
I love doing that. Yeah.
And I was like, whoa. And so it was this thing for me realization, I guess, where it was like there's a lot of like obvious poverty, right?
Absolutely.
But then there's this richness. And I felt that richness and like lushness, the agriculture. And so I guess just to go back to your initial question, I would love to have my own line of coffee.
I'm excited. I will brew a cup right now.
Yeah, I'm importing the beans directly from the farmers that are working on my they call my grandfather's farm. I would love to learn about cocoa processing. And also, I just want to say one more thing about especially that Sierra Leone trip. I think more than anything, what I came back with is like everything has a process. And I think sometimes, especially coming from the West, we think you have your network or you have this know-how or whatever, and it's going to be so easy to come in beans and roast them. No. When on that first trip, first I had to have someone go to the village before to let them know that we were coming.
Oh, yeah.
Then it was Friday, so it's prayers, Jummah. My family's Muslim.
Okay.
And so then we had to wait for them to come back from the mosque. Then after they come back from the mosque, they wanted to feed us. Various, the chief of the village had maybe several wives. And so each of the wives wanted to prepare something for us to eat.
Yeah.
Then after that, it's like, okay, now you have to give some sort of monetary or whether it's oil or rice or something to everyone in the village. And then let's talk about the coffee. I've come back here with so much more of an appreciation for cultural practices that you have to be respectful of when you want to do business in another country.
Yeah.
And it's not, like I said, it's not just coming in and having a business meeting and talking about how many tons of coffee. No, it's like you're going to eat this food from the chief's wife.
Yeah, it's a dance.
You're going to wait for us to come back from praying, and then we can talk about business, and so I'm learning that.
Yeah, and I think it's so beautiful that you are being respectful of that, because I think that's what's important too. Is I think a lot about even learning local languages. Like, I'm the only one of my siblings who speaks a local language, and I'm thinking, are my kids going to know the local language? There's no Duolingo for tree or anything like that. So I think and I think especially African cultures are very oral, they're very oratory. So being able to hold on to the culture while being able to preserve the culture, while being able to educate another generation of a culture, I wouldn't be surprised if your first coffee doesn't come out for the next 7 years because you're spending so many years developing a brand.
And that was another kind of almost worry I had with the fundraising, that people were going to be like, all right, where's the coffee?
It's coming.
Where's the coffee? And so I'm trying to be really thoughtful and not have that pressure kind of impact what I'm doing. I hired a local videographer there to kind of come on the journey with me, and we're taking it slow. Before I put anything out there, I want to take my time. I'm working with a producer that's in Ghana to actually help with the voiceover and all of that. And so I'm being really thoughtful about those things. And I hope, thankfully, the people that support me, no one's like, hey, I give you $50. Where's my coffee? It's not that at all. And I think, again, it just speaks to the importance of having a community of people who are really invested in you and what you're doing in your journey. I think people are, if anything, just curious to know what I've been up to, more so than putting any pressure on me to deliver on any sort of promise that I may have made.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to do my favorite part of the show, the Future Flash 5, the future of grocery stores.
I want to see grocery stores where local and organic is the norm.
The future of cookbooks.
Cookbooks, I'm thinking about online recipes and people actually taking the time to really enjoy and savor the forewords and the writing.
Love it. The future of food travel.
Where food travel isn't just going to some faraway land, but it's getting on the Amtrak and going to Lowell.
I love it. The future of social media.
I want to say it's obsolete, but that's probably not true. But I don't know. I think it's obsolete and replaced with in-person community.
The future of cake.
I want to see it go back to being simple. No more fig leaf. Just simple cakes.
I love it. Jenneh, thank you so much for this conversation. I learned so much. And how can people continue to support you and keep up with your exciting journeys to come?
You can follow me on Instagram at Pelah Kitchen. You can go on my website. There will eventually be a link to follow up with my newsletter where I will show some of those behind the scenes from my trip and that video that I'm talking about. So that will be coming soon. But you can follow my Instagram to stay posted on when that's live.
That's exciting. Again, thank you so much. You are the future of food, and we're excited to keep following your future.
Thank you. This was so great.
Before we go, Jenneh is going to leave a voicemail at the Future of Food mailbox, just talking to herself 10 years from now.
Hey, girl. How are you? Seriously, how are you? It's been 10 years, and I hope you've slowed things all the way down. Right now, it feels like I'm being pulled in a million different directions, and I hope that you're living a life that proves you don't have to choose. Whether you're a world-renowned cake designer, boutique hotel and cafe owner, that your coffee is all over shelves in America and filling cups in West Africa, I hope you're in a loving and fulfilling partnership with children that are as smart and hilarious as you were at their age. More than anything, I hope you're happy. I hope that over the last decade, you've learned to prioritize your own well-being and that you've let go of control and having all the answers. I hope you finally believe in yourself, because with every step you've taken towards your future, God and your people have been there to give you a nudge forward and support you as you've stumbled. I hope you're happy because you deserve it. I hope you're proud of yourself because you did it. I'm really proud of you.
That's it for today's show. Do you know someone who you think is the future of food? Tell us about them. Nominate them at the link in our show notes. I can't wait to read more about them. Thanks to Kerrygold for sponsoring the show. Visit KerrygoldUSA.com for more. The Future of Food is You is a production of the Cherry Bomb Podcast Network. Thanks to the team at CityVox Studios, executive producers Carrie Diamond and Catherine Baker, and associate producer Jenneh. Catch you on the Future Flip!